This is our articulation and movement project. Action. Here we are showing the articulation of the foot.
Mom is pointing her toe. She's showing articulation, which involves a give and take relationship between strength and movement. Typically, there's a compromise between joint mobility and strength. The stronger the joint, the less range of motion. The more range of motion, the weaker the stability of the joint. As she points her toe up, she's showing the dorsal flexion at the ankle, and as she points it back down, she's showing plantar flexion, which is extension at the ankle. Come on, Autumn, we're filming a video here.
Here today, we're learning about the fibrosis joints and the synthrosis joints, which are immovable joints.
This is Craig and Autumn. They're dancing at homecoming. Notice, they're not twerking. Okay, if we look at the top of Craig's skull, we will see that there is a suture joint. It's a joint that the bones of the skull are interlocked and bound together by a dense connective tissue. These joints are synthrosis, meaning immovable. This is Craig. Craig says hi. Craig is showing the gomphosis joint. It's the joint that binds teeth to bony sockets in the maxillary and mandible bones. And they're connected by a ligament of fibrous connective tissue. Ooh. This is Craig and Autumn freeze dancing. They're representing another immovable joint called sychondrosis joint. It's connected by a rigid cartilaginous connection, and we're showing the one between the sternum and the first pair of ribs. Slightly immovable joints, anthrosis. In this example, she's showing the syndesmosis joint as she's doing the balling dance. A fibrous joint connected by a ligament when a bone joint surfaces are relatively far apart. In this example, she's showing the one between the radius and the ulna. So as she bends it, it's showing the joint. As Craig and Autumn are just sitting here, Autumn's just sitting there admiring Craig's symphysis joint, which is a cartilaginous joint where the bones are separated by a broad disc or pad of fiber cartilage between the right and left halves of the pelvis. Hello, Governor Riffee. These are the 6 types of synovial joints or diarthrosis. This is Autumn and Craig dancing at homecoming 2K14, having the best time, dancing the night away. And now Autumn's going to teach Craig how to vogue. And as Craig is voguing, he's showing a gliding joint or a synovial joint. And gliding joints have flattened or slightly curved faces. They are relatively flat and they slide right across from each other. So they have slight rotation, elevation, depression, protraction, retraction, and slight direction. Good.
Alright, here she's showing an example of a hinge joint as she opens and closes her arm. And it's an angular movement in a single plane connecting like a door hinge. So like as if you would open the door or close the door, it's the hinge that's helping her joint opens and closes it. And examples of them, it helps extension, so extend your arm, hyperextension, elevation, depression, protraction. Bailey here is showing an example of the pivot joint, an anatomical articulation that consists of a bony pivot in a ring of bone and ligament, and this permits rotary movement only.
Of the hand. As Autumn bends her finger, she's showing the ipsilateral or conchoid. One bone has a shallow process, fits into another with a shallow depression. Oval face nestles within a depression. Angular motion on 2 planes permits circumduction, inversion, eversion, flexion, and extension. As Autumn moves her hands open, she's showing the abduction because they're moving away from the center, the medial. And as she puts them back together, she's showing adduction because they're moving back together.
Here we are representing the saddle joints. They have articular faces that fit together like a rider and a saddle. Each face in a concave on one axis and convex on the other, and the opposing faces nest together. This argument permits angular motion, including circumduction, but prevents rotation. Twiddling your thumbs will demonstrate the possible movements. Saddle also permits opposition, circumduction, flexion, extension, and hyperextension.
Swinging her legs, she's showing an example of a ball and socket joint. The rounded process, condyle, rests inside a cup-shaped depression, fossa, of another bone. Permits circumduction, rotation, abduction, and adduction. These are the movements of the synovial joints. Flexion is the movement in the anterior posterior plane that decreases the angle between articulating bones. While Cameron's doing the nay-nay, he's showing us an example of extension, which is a movement in the anterior posterior plane, but it increases the angle between articulating bones. These terms are usually applied to movements of long bones of the limbs.
Got that nay?
I am Jake and you're watching Disney Channel.
Circumduction is another type of angular movement. An example of circumduction is moving your arm in a loop. As Autumn is grooving, she's showing another synovial joint rotation, which involves turning around the longitudinal axis of a body or a limb. Here she's doing an example of the Macarena, and as she flips her hands back and forth, it's an example of rotation. She's moving over the longitudinal axis of her body. And as her palms are faced forward, it's supination, and when she flips it back down, it's pronation.
Alright, here she's doing the stinky leg, and it's showing the special movements of the foot. And as she goes in, it's showing inversion, which is the twisting motion of the foot that turns the sole inward, and the opposition movement would be eversion, which is opposite.
As Bailey's doing the llama dance, she's representing opposition, and that is the movement of the thumb toward the palm or the fingertips that enables you to grasp and hold an object. And then reposition is the movement that returns the thumb from opposition, so your hands are out. Here Bailey is showing an example of protraction as she crosses her arms. Protraction occurs when you move a part of the body anteriorly in the horizontal plane. She's protracting her clavicles when she crosses her arms. When she uncrosses her arms, she's showing an example of retraction, which is a reverse movement.
Autumn's doing the shoulder shrug dance, and as she moves her shoulders up, she's showing elevation because she's moving it in a superior direction. As she drops her shoulders back down, she's showing a depression because she's moving her shoulders in an inferior direction. As Autumn is neck twitching, she's showing lateral flexion, which occurs when the vertebral column bends to the side. We dedicate this video to Matthew Riffee.
I have had the best cooperation here out of everybody. So.
We have to let the dog out, Cameron.
Cooper, you gotta go outside.
Every day is payday. Swipe my card, then I do the nay-nay.